Right, so in this tutorial, we're just going to do a little program that increments a certain value up and down based on which button we click. So what we want to have is an h1 tag that has counter, and we want to have 0, and we want to have a button that increments, and we also want to have a button that decrements. Decrements, yeah. So that's what we want to have. And if we go back to our web page, we want to have something like this: counter 0, and when I click on increment, sorry, I said increments and decrements. That sounds really weird, but this is ultimately what we want to have. And also, I think it would be fine. It would be great, actually, if we exchanged that. So yeah, when we click here, it should count down. When we click here, it should count up. And how we do that is we want to use an on-click property here. So the way we do that is by using these parentheses, and then inside the parentheses you want to have click, and then you want to have a function that you want to call every time you click on this button. So we're going to do the same thing here. So this is essentially what we want to have. And as you can see, it's going to complain because it actually expects something there. So for now, let me just leave it as 0. Let me just leave it at 0 because we're going to actually call a function or a method here, but we haven't created that method yet. And what I want to do here is use string interpolation to add a value that is going to be defined in our TS. And I'm going to delete this piece of code that we added before. And that value is going to be counter. So that value is going to be counter, and we're going to define that value counter, and we're going to initialize it to 0. And so what we want to do is we want to have a function that says increment, and we also want to have a decrement function, right? So increment function is going to be called when we click on the increment button. Decrement is going to be called when we click on the decrement button. So if we go to our HTML, this is where we're going to add, or let me just do that now. We're going to call increment like that, and we're going to call decrement just like that. It's a capital I, it's supposed to be a small I. Anyway, so that's how it's supposed to be, and as you can see, it tells me that, oops, did I make a mistake somewhere? Increment, oh yeah, that's a capital D, it's supposed to be a small d. Decrement, and if we go back to the HTML, increment and decrement, okay, that should be fine. So yeah, that's how it is. And as you can see here, counter 0, and we use string interpolation to add that value that we defined in our component, and we have 0 over here. If that value was 1, for instance, then it would be displayed as 1 over here. But we don't want to manually increases and decrease it. We only want to do it when we click on a certain button. So how do we increment? So we start by just saying counter this dot counter. This is very important. When you say this, you're making TypeScript aware that you're talking about the property that is defined within this class. And you can just say plus plus, and then we're gonna reload that. And when we click on increment, well, nothing happens. Why? Increment. Let me just double check why that isn't working. Oh, I added an sorry about that, guys. Probably just a little sleepy. Just gonna change that. Cool. So now when we click on increment, then it's supposed to increment basically. And we're gonna carry on with the same logic on decrement. Nothing fancy. We just say this dot counter plus plus, and now we're gonna say this dot counter minus minus. And now when we decrement, it goes down, and when we increment, it goes up. So maybe you might want to have some bit of logic that checks if it's less than zero, you don't want to go down. You don't want to decrement less than zero. You only want to decrement when the numbers are above zero. So what you want to do is you want to go to your decrement and you want to check if this dot counter is greater than zero. Oops. Then you want to decrement, right? So it's a nice little check. So when you decrement, nothing's gonna happen. When you increment, something's gonna happen. When you increment, when you decrement, it's going to decrement, but only up until zero. And when it gets to zero, it's not going to decrement anymore. So basically, this is just a simple way or something simple or a simple exercise that demonstrates the power of Angular. It's all very, very simple, much different to when you're using vanilla JavaScript. So yeah, later on, we're gonna do much more serious and complex stuff, and I hope you guys are excited for that.